Today's meeting is going to include a budget update from the superintendent and the CFO with the revisions that were made to the proposed budget, and then we will have some time for final comments and questions from the budget committee, and there's staff here that are on hand to answer those questions that we may have. So we'll get started with some opening comments from the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we get started, I don't know if she's in the room, but want to thank Ann Irwin, the principal of EHS, for lending us her high school today. Also, I want to express special gratitude to the Budget Committee, board members, for your work during this process, as well as reiterating what Denise said regarding public comment and for whether it's staff and community members to be so engaged in this process. This revised proposed budget continues to have class size as the priority. That was heard loud and clear in working with our VEA partners, hearing from our community. Class size will remain a priority. Since our last budget meeting, there have been several major developments that have taken place and will or could impact this budget in the future. They include the district has reached an agreement with VEA regarding COLA, cost of living allowance, in the bargaining agreement. That agreement was settled for 2 years with a reopener of compensation after the first year. The increase in COLA was 2.25%, and it needs to be known that that 2.25% also will impact classified staff and administrative staff. The cost of living increase results in approximately $7.7 million in increased expenditures. Those expenditures, $7.7 million, will be taken out of the rainy day fund. There will be no additional reductions to staff. After that transfer is completed, a total of $18.4 million will be taken from the rainy day fund, leaving the rainy day fund at $3.8 million. Also, House Bill 3427 has passed and the governor has signed the bill, which will bring in an investment of approximately $2 billion to pre-K through 12 education. Will be the single largest investment that's been made in public education in the history of Oregon. With that increase, what does it mean to be retained? It means approximately in the first year we would not receive any revenue until July 1 of 2020. It means approximately $34 million to the Beaverton School District. It's also important to note that there is already an organized opposition to pass legislation. And so it will be on the ballot on January 21st of 2020, in which voters in Oregon will go to the ballot box and decide if it continues in its current form and or is rejected. Another significant piece of legislation that was passed was PERS legislation that would reduce future growth in PERS rates beginning in the 2021-2023 biennium. If it remains intact, that would significantly reduce increases in PERS, not only to the Beaverton School District, but other agencies employing PERS employees throughout Oregon. As a caveat, this could also be challenged in the courts. It would not be a referendum. It would probably most likely be challenged in the courts, go through the courts, and it's our understanding that that process is underway with some various entities. What I will say about this budget is going to be a very tight budget. This budget will need to be reviewed ongoing. Some factors that we will have to continue to look at is enrollment. Beaverton is not seeing the increase in enrollment that it has in the past. We will be flat and or in declining enrollment. Birth rates are continuing to be scheduled to decrease through 2029. So in the past, it has always been nice to have 400, 500, 600 students come in that those revenues were not counted on, and those revenues were used to balance any deficits that were in the budget. We do not have that luxury anymore. In addition, what we are trying to do, along with interim CFO Jim Schersinger will talk about that in a little bit and expand on some of the things I'm talking about, creating the checks and balances system so we do not get into this situation again. Being able to monitor our budget along the way, making sure that cross-department checks and balances are taking place. Jim has agreed to stay on and do an audit of our system, and he'll talk about this a little bit later. We have a complex system. I think we need to simplify it. I think there's too much guesstimation in the system. In addition, to make sure that we are reviewing and monitoring and making sure that we stay in good standing with our bargaining contracts. And that means knowing the contracts and following the contracts and making sure that if there is any trigger language in there that it's followed. I think it also means building a strong relationship with BEA and having them as a partner and coming in, and we've been working with Terry Nolan, who also has been assisting us in making sure that we can agree on the numbers. We might not always agree on where we want to spend the money, but at least agree on the numbers. And so that is a priority to make sure that we're working hand in hand with whether it's the certified, classified folks, and just making sure, hey, we should be able to agree on the numbers. At this time, I want to turn it over to interim CFO Schersinger, and he will go into some detail on the budget, and then we will allow for some questions from the budget committee. And I want you to know that staff is on hand here, ready to answer any and all questions from budget committee members. Thank you.
Real quick, we're gonna back it up. We need to take a minute to approve the minutes from the May 22nd, 2019 budget meeting. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes from the May 22nd, 2019 budget meeting. Second.
If everyone could show their yes or no vote by raising your hands. We have approved the minutes from the May 22nd, 2019 budget meeting. We'll now turn the time over to them.
Madam Chair. All right. First, I'd like to go through the material that you have, so it's clear what you have in front of you and and I'll try to hit the highlights of each one of those. The first thing is the big budget document, which you had the last time. And just as a brief review, the main points of what was in that document compared to the original proposed budget that you had. First of all, there is corrections that were made because to the implementation of the contract triggers that we've talked a lot about. The reduction of the 5 school days and the 9 days for classified staff people, and the roll-up of a 0.5% COLA for certified staff. Second thing is restoration of the teacher staffing ratios that the superintendent talked about. The third is additional central office reductions that were made to the original proposed budget. In that document, I think it's actually very well laid out. Beginning on page 6, is a consolidated list of the cuts that are in this budget. And if you were to go through all of them, you'd end up with about 99 certified staff and 43 non-certified positions are cut. And that total there is about $24 million. And so there's a list of the cuts and the rationale for making those cuts in that document. I found it very useful. Then, in addition, there were some updated revenues and costs. We tried to update the revenues and other costs to the latest estimate for that cost. And that's something that I think isn't always done all the way up until June. So sometimes and that certainly happened in the last budget, was some of the revenue and cost estimates were based on earlier estimates that by the time you adopted the budget were a little out of date. So we tried to update those as much as we could. And then finally, in that budget, there is a $10.7 million transfer from the rainy day fund to balance the budget, primarily paying for in addition to the other adjustments, then finally paying for restoring the teacher staffing ratios. So that's that document. Then, since the last meeting, and since you had that document, some additional events have occurred. The biggest one was the tentative bargaining agreement to a 2.25% COLA. And I should have said, if you look, there's 2 stapled together pages. If you look at the second page, there's a description of all of the changes to the revised document that now are going into what's called the recommended approved budget. So this is a sort of a detailed description of the effects on the appropriations of the revisions to the revised proposed budget that would now be the recommended approved budget. And essentially there are 4 changes in there. First of all, incorporating the 2.25% COLA out of the tentative bargaining agreement. And that's most of the changes there. There's a small revenue adjustments that actually add to 0 as a shifting between line items. Then there is the transfer for the rainy day fund, an increased transfer from the rainy day fund of $7.7 million, which brings the total transfer to $18.4 million. That leaves $3.8 million in the rainy day fund after that transfer. Now, I should point out that the regular budget and the proposed budget, as well as it remains in this budget, is we are restoring the contingency in the general fund to $25 million. So that actually represents an increase over the beginning balance of about $6-7 million over the beginning balance for the current year. It's restoring that contingency to $25 million. And then, in addition to those three changes, there are some non-general fund revenue increases. The state has decided to distribute full funding of the High School Success Measure 98 funds. The revenue for this is coming out of essentially House Bill 3427. So they're saying at the same time that we ought to be ready to, I'm not sure what the right words is, to deal with the fact that it might fail. And that kind of puts you in actually a no-win situation. The way the budget handles it, it recognizes the revenue and it places the expenditure all in one place for future determination as to how you or whether you might want to spend those funds. I don't know, funny is not the right word, but they used to do this to my state agency all the time. They would tell us that we needed to spend X on a program and then be ready to cut it or to be ready not spend it if the revenue doesn't come, which of course once you've already spent it, you're stuck. But anyway, that's what they've done with that. There's $6 million of that in that 6.4 million. There's also a seismic grant award of $5 million that's included in there in the spending for that, and an early learning grant of $400,000 that is spendable, and the spending is included for that in these adjustments. So that's the reconciliation page. The attached page on the front is the resulting set of appropriations that you would be recommending to the full board to adopt. And that's the rightmost column under recommended approved budget. So you have the revised proposed budget, the adjustments that are here by appropriation, and then what the recommended approved budget would be with those changes. And then lastly, you should have, I think it's in really small print on the reconciliation page, the motion, I think you have it in big print elsewhere, the motion that you would have to approve the recommended approved budget that's presented here. So that's the material you have. So maybe I have a few other things to say, but I could deal, well, actually we have a time for questions anyway, so maybe I just go through the whole thing and then come back. Okay, so that's the materials that we have. As the superintendent said, this is a very tight budget, and it's a tight budget at a very pivotal time. And in fact, it's almost a perfect storm kind of time, both on the good side and on the bad side. If you think about the big picture with the budget, you're cutting 140 positions and $24 million. At the same time, you're having to take $18 million out of reserves. And that's a pretty scary scenario. And I recognize, there are some things to recognize about that. First of all, first of all is that a whole bunch of things have led up to having all of these things happen at one time. And this is the perfect storm result of that. And it's the result of having some budget errors that were made, and then having to, it's not that those costs wouldn't have been there, it's just delaying the recognition of those costs and pushing them in 2 years recognition into one budget, in effect. It's a little more hidden here, but we've done the same thing on the revenue side. I talked about updating the revenue estimates to the latest available. And so we've kind of pushed that recognition from 2 years into 1 year. And that's partially what's going on here. And then the last thing is this flattening enrollment growth. Is that it was interesting. I went back and since we're going to look at the full budget meeting, an adjustment to in a supplemental budget to the general fund, at the history of the district in doing supplemental budgets. And it turns out we have done one almost every year, but it's almost always been funded by growth. Well, that growth is going away. And so you have a combination of all of these other issues that have happened, combining with flattening enrollment, which was the kind of thing that would have solved these problems in the past. And we rolled it all into one budget. And that's why it looks as bad as it looks. So recognizing that this pivotal time is one of flattening enrollment is just as important as the other two things, the passage or non-passage of House Bill 3427, if it goes to a vote, that potentially is a significant revenue increase with a substantial increase in accountability that can offer some really, can offer a potentially better future if we manage it in the right way. And we have a PERS bill that has passed that's designed to stop the future growth in PERS rates. Now, whether it will actually do that or not, that's a very volatile financial situation. Whether it actually does it or not is unknown, and it creates just more volatility in the system. So you have all three of these things happening at the same time, and actually getting pushed into 1 year, what normally would have happened in 2. So I think recognizing that in saying, well, maybe it's not as bad as it looks because of this compression, but on the other hand, it really points out the need to do better in the future, to deal with the enrollment it's flattening, and in fact maybe even declining, and actually having to deal with the PERS and the state budget, and just doing a better job of pulling all that together. So the superintendent had asked me to look at what he calls checks and balances, and it's the goodest term as any for it. And I really think of that as 4 things. Number 1 is budget model improvements. I think one thing to recognize about the budget module, it's a very efficient system. It lets us produce a budget with very few people. And what other districts might take 5 to 10 people to produce a budget like that, especially if they're doing it on spreadsheets. It's a great system. The problem is that it's complicated, and it has a few flaws that make it less transparent than it should be. It's very difficult to see sometimes what's going on in the system, and that needs to be fixed. I don't think it's an option to replace it, at least not in the short run, but there are ways to make it more transparent, and we are going to look for ways to even improve some of the technical flaws that it has. So that's number 1. I think the second thing is that there's and I've seen this in a lot of practically every place I've been, is creating more of an expectation that issues will get surfaced when they come up. And it's a funny thing. I have seen in many places where people are just afraid, they know the budget is tight and they're afraid to raise issues because it's just going to make it worse. And I've always found that I have to be very, I can't expect people to bring problems to me, I have to keep going out and asking if there are problems. And that I will pledge to do as long as I'm here. You have to create an expectation that if there are problems, you're going to hear about them. And not worry about the reaction to the problem. I think the third thing is, given everything that's happening, we need a multi-year and a multi-fund budget framework. I know the district here has done some multi-year work before, and I'm learning how that's been done. But it needs to be expanded under 3427 into multi-funds, because some of that money is coming in other funds. And you really only have one educational goal. You have one educational system, and I mean, not one you have a holistic educational goal, put it that way. And everything should work together to achieve that goal, and you need to be able to look at across all your instructional strategies across all your funds. And I think that's going to become even more important under the House Bill 3427. And then lastly, I think the superintendent has talked about this as well, about what I call budgeting to what works, which means having a good system to decide what works, whether it's a return on investment type of system or metrics, some agreement on how to determine whether a program is working or not, and then a budget system that often is called zero-based that lets you move money to programs that work and away from programs that don't. I've never liked the term zero-based because it's usually interpreted to be a structure, which it is, but the structure isn't going to work if you don't have the other piece of it, which is the metrics and the agreed upon method of determining what works and doesn't work. And I think that, again, is becoming even more important under the new legislation. Sometimes it's harder to spend new money effectively, efficiently, or even harder to spend new money as efficiently as it is old money that you're used to spending. But anyway, those are the observations I have about the budget. I think the board, the budget committee, and the public at large really needs to get engaged in the next year's budget. This is going to be a crucial budget going forward.
Thank you, Jim. We will now have a review and rationale proposed cuts by staff. Do you remember who's starting this?
I think what we were going to do is allow questions to be surfaced, and if there's a particular staff member in that area, we have them come forward to answer the questions.
And I'm sorry, did we also have out there the questions that were asked and the answers? I think those are. They were sent to you. Right. So I forgot what I was supposed to mention.
So we're going to start with our. We were going to go around, but you're welcome to start us off if you want, Susan. No.
I mean, it's got the contingency fund, are we now back at 5%? Is that what we did with the contingency fund?
The 25 million is back at 5%.
I've asked Heidi to actually start us off with her final comments and questions. So I don't have any specific questions. The document that Jim referred to was the questions that have been submitted from those of us on the budget committee as well as the public. So if you haven't had a chance to read through those are available online, correct? And that was helpful for me in addressing some of the questions I had, which I submitted, but then also those questions that we were hearing from the public. So thank you for your work with that. You want final comments? Yeah. So just to reflect upon the process and thank the community, including staff, teachers, students, for your feedback over the year. This has been the most difficult budget process I've been through since serving on this committee over the past 4 years. And grateful for the emails that we've received and the opportunity to meet in person with some of you personally. Again, appreciation for all the work that has done. I feel at this point, I'm confident that the work that Superintendent Grotting and his staff have done, the necessary steps to address committee concerns, as well as to rebuild the budget. Jim and your team rebuilding the budget from bottom up to address how we can further improve budget development and this process moving forward for it to be more transparent. Sadly, this has all come down to a number of things, 3 things that equal that perfect storm, but really that disinvestment from the state in funding education. And personally, I work in higher education, and we're dealing with very similar cuts. And so for me personally, having children in the school district and being on this committee is an impersonal investment for me, but we're seeing this at all levels of education throughout the state. And I would say that we need to continue to stay engaged. As was mentioned, we've been engaged with local officials and lawmakers, and we've been on the streets, but now we need to be on the streets talking to voters, calling voters, talking to voters when the time comes, when that referendum hits the ballot. That's going to be crucial for us to be able to move forward in hopes of having that $34 million that we hope to have come out of 3427. What we've heard ongoingly is that class size matters. We know class size matters. Again, that is what we are trying to tackle. There are some really difficult cuts that we're having to make or that are being made through this budget, but when it comes down to it, we want to maintain class sizes because we know that means improved education for our students. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for considering tapping into that rainy day fund, cutting the school days, the departmental program cuts, which are not easy. There's difficult choices to be made, and in hopes that in the near future we can rebuild this budget for the support programs and the areas that we have been able to invest in. Closing note, to reflect upon what we're doing well in the school district, we've built in a lot of great measures in the schools or in the district over time, and so to follow upon that as well. And I think if we go around the table, Leanne, would you like to be next? I would be happy to be next.
So I just want to start by thanking Superintendent Grotting for his leadership. Once the miscalculations and some of the errors were discovered, I really felt like we took swift action. We hired our interim CFO and tasked the business department with the long, hard work of revising the work. So thank you for doing that. Thank you, Jim Schwerzinger, for agreeing to come on board at that point. Thank you to the business office for going through the budget and all the calculations clearly with a fine-tooth comb. I too, like Heidi, feel very confident now in the numbers that are presented here in our revised budget document. My comments are that reductions are always hard. They're the most difficult to consider at budget time. But I want it known that as a board and a budget committee, all students matter and all staff are important to us. Resources are limited. We don't have a money tree that grows in Beaverton. I wish we did. Choices have to be made in order to balance our budget. And after much consideration, it seems necessary that we do have to tap into our rainy day fund. And just for clarification, there's 2 funds. There's a 5% contingency by board policy and a 5% rainy day fund by board policy as well. But we're gonna have to tap into the rainy day fund for the balancing of next year and its budget. And I want it to be noted that without the commitment of our school board to set aside this extra 5% in our rainy day fund, these funds would not have been available to help through next year. We would have had to cut $18 million more without that rainy day fund. So I personally had hoped that these funds would have been available should we need them with House Bill 3427 after being referred to the voters is defeated. That's when it will be pouring rain. But if that is the case, and I'm going to do my darndest and hard work to avoid that, we're going to have to find a different solution. So I just want to publicly thank my fellow board members for your commitment and your foresight to set aside these funds to be used in this way. In regards to the budget for 2019 and 20, though the reductions are difficult and painful, and I've had all my questions answered, I do believe they are necessary to balance the budget, and I do support it as it is. Again, I want to just thank everybody. It's been a hard spring. It's been a hard budget process. Everybody has worked extremely difficult. And I really want to thank our community and our teachers and everybody for being interested and involved in our budget process.
So I have a couple of questions from the budget document, so I'll just pull that out for staff and people to be prepared. My first is on the restructuring of the alternate education program. It's discussed creating a new pilot program and just exactly where we're going to find the $1 million in savings there. How are we serving that same number of kids, but with $1 million of money? What that might look like. So it doesn't quite make sense to me how we're saving money on that one. And yeah, however we want to go ahead and directly answer.
Hi there, John Franco, I'm the Executive Administrator for High Schools. And so the savings, so it's a complete restructuring. So Bridges as it exists today has a significant number of staffing. If you think about it, and Jim could potentially correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about potentially around 50,000 per student ADM as opposed to 7,500 to maybe 10,000 ADM. And so when you're talking about that potential amount of funding, because in order to operate Bridges, you have to have certain core opportunities. You also have to have some elective opportunities. And so what we're talking about savings is really going to be in regards to staffing. Okay, so in restructuring the entire model, coming up with more, how can I say, a more in-depth intake process for students, trying to come up with in partnership with parents. So for say students who are expelled, a more in-depth intake process to try and come up with what is the root cause of the behavior, and then utilizing some opportunities like BSD Flex, potentially home instruction. Merlot is going to kind of be the hub. So the facility where Bridges is at in terms of the CAP Center, we're no longer going to be using that. And so we feel like this is absolutely not only, I would say the money is kind of an afterthought. This is the right thing to do for kids because it's more individualized to what each individual student needs. And so that's an exciting piece there. And it just so happens that it absolutely will save money because you're not going to need as much staff because of the differentiation, the using of existing staff at Merlot, the incorporating of VSD Flex a little bit more and the expansion of that, and then using drug and alcohol supports, social emotional pieces that are currently do exist at Merlot.
So your cost per student at Merlot is less than your cost of growth.
Correct. I probably just could have said that.
My next question is on the augmentative communications assistive technology specialists, the reduction in that, and how many children will be affected by that?
Hi, I'm Danielle Hudson. I'm the Executive Administrator for Student Services. We have approximately 140 students who access augmentative communication and/or assistive technology through our special education department. As a future ready district, so as we've increased a lot of our technology use, the reliance on a specialized AT assistive technology need has significantly decreased. A lot of the supports like Google Read and Write, speech to text, all of those tools are just naturally embedded. So we've been working with John Petlinski and the Future Ready team to be able to just have universally embedded supports. So that's been really exciting for us to have that combined. Next year we will have one augmentative communication specialist who will then work to collaborate with the speech language pathologists who work with those students. So we've built a plan for this. There have been an ebb and flow where we've had one AT/AC person, and then we've had two, and then we've had one. So we're really looking at trying to build a system where the SLPs, the speech language pathologists who are working with the students, become experts in AC devices versus having one person or two people in the district who are kind of the keeper of all that information.
Great, thank you. You want comments now? Well, I'll go ahead and give my 2 cents. I just recently came on in December, really, to the budget committee. So it's been an interesting few months. So I thank everyone for the onboarding, the information that we got, the little bit of training that we got, and nothing like things can, have us deal with $35 million. So I think the staff has been great about answering questions and having everybody in, and they're talking through this pretty thoroughly. But on the flip side, I'm concerned about how we got here and the checks and balances that have been in place. So that concerns me that obviously we have some checks and balances there that caught this, but at the same time, it seems like it could have slipped through also. So which would have just exponentially, made this worse on down the line. So I'm very concerned I'm very interested in our new CFOs, seeing that the future budgets laid out in comparison, because that and how we would deal with not having this extra $20 million and after this next year. So that all concerns me. I'm interested in the process and I want to see this through the next year. So this is, I appreciate the opportunity. I come from other states and other governments. I've seen a lot, and it's a very interesting process to have community involvement, and I do appreciate the way that it's structured. But I really want to thank staff. I know I've been a staff member before, so I really appreciate all the help. And it's unfortunate what the position that we are in right now, but I think we have gone back and appreciate the leadership on the committee to go back and really fine tune these things and really catch some of the errors and improve, and everybody has really pushed in to try to do what's best for the students. And we've definitely been on board on that class size part, protecting our teachers and our students. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I just would like to thank everyone for all their hard work, refining the numbers and doing what we can to preserve teachers, because at the end of the day, that does help our students excel in school. As everyone has said before me, this has been a very difficult process, very painful, but we finally made it hopefully to the end. And I support everything that Leanne said, so I won't repeat it. And I do support the budget in its current state.
I also just jumped on this committee just this spring, so it has been a really interesting experience. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet in person and have questions answered, and I do appreciate the amount of advocacy that we've seen from teachers and students and families coming here. That has been like tremendous, and I 100% believe that no change happens without collective action, and so I would, I'm a mom, I've got a second grader, and I'm worried about what's going to happen with him, with the pets that are experiencing, and I would say, we just need to keep advocating for our kids and families, especially those that are most impacted by these pets, regardless of what school they're in.
So first of all, I want to thank Budget Committee, School Board, staff. I mean, the staff did an amazing job of putting together a new budget from scratch in a very, very, very short time. The other thing is I recognize the support of our teachers and our community, and I want to thank them as well for participating in the system. I am concerned about House Bill 3427 passing. I mean, until everything is done, I'm going to worry about, okay, are we really going to have the money? So I would hope that we work collaboratively as a team, as a partner with our community, with our teachers, to make sure it passes in January. And I also want to point out that, we just spent $18 million of our rainy day fund, and I hope that we don't have to have any further cuts next year. I know that we haven't been very stressed. I think that everybody believes in putting our children first, and I just, again, want to reiterate that I hope we all work together to make sure Measure 3427 makes it back to us.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Dawn and your deputies. I think it's hard for a reasonable person to come away unimpressed with your leadership through all of this. This impassioned process. I think there's a lot of emotion for all of us from a good place. Thank you to the entire budget team for all the hard work and extra effort, and for being so nimble in your responses and your responsiveness to and taking the time with the budget committee. Thank you for your courage in making the tough decisions, specifically the tough decision with tapping into the rainy day fund and the brains. I'm glad you guys are erring on optimism. So, like just hoping, thank you for making those decisions through the conviction of our fundamental core value of putting our students' education first, and relying on that. I think it's really important. And lastly, I think it's important to say thank you to the community for speaking for your students, for speaking for the families, and for being a voice for all those involved. So it's really impressive to see our community. I'm so proud of the Beaver School District and everybody that has it. So it was even though this was a tough year, this is my second year involved, and wow, I'm sure it's quite some tough decisions we've all had to make so far. So thanks for stepping up to the plate, and of course, Jim, thanks for swinging in like you did, standing behind the numbers for us. I can't imagine where we'd be without that. So thank you.
I want to start by saying that for me, this budget cycle has been an emotional roller coaster. From budget meetings in the fall where it was clear we were headed into a cut year, to discovering a deficit halfway through this year, to the passage of House Bill 3427, the Student Success Act, the discovery of accounting errors, and the superintendent's recent work to preserve teaching positions and rebuild the budget. This has been an incredibly stressful budget year. I know this is true for me, and I've heard the same from students, educators, and parents across the district who are dealing with potential cuts to beloved staff and programs. Thank you to everyone who has testified at the budget hearing. Your input is valuable. Good public process requires input from our whole community, and I learned a great deal from everyone who came forward to voice their concerns and ideas. I echo much of the concern in the community about the recent accounting errors. Serving in an oversight role, I take seriously my responsibility to ensure that district budgets are accurate, clear, and free of error. I want to thank Mr. Scherzinger for his recent leadership in rebuilding the budget and working to track down errors. I look forward to learning more about how we can ensure errors like this don't happen again. Key to my support of this budget is the need to balance the next fiscal year's needs against those of the more distant future. A good budget provides proper staffing and programming for our current students while maintaining our facilities and managing our debts to ensure the district is in strong enough financial health to provide for the needs of future students. Walking this tightrope between current and future needs has been particularly difficult this year. With a large deficit, a key question becomes how much money from our reserves is appropriate to spend. The current budget revision staves off the worst of the cuts. A reduction of approximately 160 classroom teachers that could have resulted in much larger class sizes and widespread teacher transfers. I am relieved to see this approximately 160 teachers now funded in the budget. With the potential for greater funding with House Bill 3427 in future years, it makes good sense to use the rainy day funds as a bridge. The use of these funds isn't without risk, though. Our current year's budget doesn't meet the Government Finance Officers Association's, that's a mouthful, target of holding 2 months of operating expenses and reserves. By spending down reserves, we are risking downgrading of the district's bond rating, which could result in bond financing becoming more expensive, limiting our ability to replace, repair, and maintain our school buildings. The district's recent seismic report shows the need for strong bond funding to provide systemic upgrades. I'm hopeful that this budget is the right balance between future and current needs. It dips into the rainy day fund to preserve teaching positions, but doesn't exhaust the district's reserves, leaving a pathway open before the next bond to restoring the rainy day fund and maintaining our current bond rating. It prioritizes the needs of students by providing further reductions in central administration in order to support teaching staff levels. But it clearly isn't the budget our students deserve. I'm deeply saddened by cuts to PYP, LITS, reading intervention, and ELD, to name just a few. While I believe this budget makes good choices with the funding we are given, that funding is not enough and our students are losing out. I hope that our community will join me in protecting and defending House Bill 3427 and the funds that it brings to our district. This historically significant increase in funding can help bring us closer to a budget our students truly deserve. In the meantime, I will be voting yes for this budget.
Well said, Tom. That's a tough act to follow. First off, I would like to acknowledge all the parents, teachers, and especially students who took the time out this year to make comments and give input to the committee. It really made a difference, and it was really great to see the passion that our community holds for not only our schools, but for the programs that we do out here. This was a difficult budget year, as we've all noted. And although adjustments were still made, I do support using the contingency reserve as a way to bridge the gap this year, rather than avoid deep cuts to our educators. I hope that the board and the internal budget committee can work together to find a way to repay those funds or replenish the contingency reserve if House Bill 3427 is not passed. And there's a plan to that. Assuming we will all look forward to that plan moving forward. And also working towards finding a baseline budget where implemented changes in this district are sustainable moving forward. So I think that would be a good goal for everybody around the state. Lastly, again, thanks everybody to fellow committee members, the board, and especially the internal budget staff. You guys have had a pretty rough year, so thank you for your tenacity and your ability to deliver under pressure. It's well done.
I have three thank yous and then a kind of a parting comment. So I want to thank public for the impassioned testimony we heard for the program that they care most nearest about. All those testimonials, they were heard by the district and the board, so we can all feel what programs are important to all the parents and the teachers, and as well as all the students. So that was very important. Also found out Jim Scherzinger and the business department did a great job, really tightening up the numbers. Revised budget came out very rapidly, and as you can see by the documentation, it's very accurate and it put us in a position where we can make informed, decision databases, movement on our budget here. And that really came out quickly, so we really thank you guys for doing all the extra work and putting in the time for that. And also, I thought the superintendent brought in, as well as the internal budget committee that he works with the district. I think they really did a fantastic job of using the funds we had to make the best decisions so they could make always the focus of student success and achievement. They had to make hard decisions. Not everybody got some of the positions had to be moved or eliminated, but I think what they did was they made the best call for the district. And it's always hard to do that with a limited budget, so thank you for being brave on that. And then I guess it's a comment more, but thank you for the senior board members who have been here more than 4 years. So Leanne, I think Susan, and I think it was really great that you guys put that rainy day fund together and funded it to a level of $20 million plus, because without that, this would be incredibly more painful. And I want to give us opportunity to the board to kind of put that bridge financing in here right now with $18 million, saving 160 plus positions, as Tom noted. I think it's really good that you guys you put that in place for board policy and you followed up with it and funded it all the way. I'm sad we're down to $3 million, but I think we're going to work hard together to get House Bill 3427 with a public pass. And I think we strive to rebuild that so we are ready for a really rainy day. And with that, I do approve the budget as a posted.
I agree with everything that's been said. So I will just add, and I am in support with the hard work that's been put in. I am in support of the budget that was sent tonight. I would just put a comment in there that these tight times, these times where we have to work in such difficult circumstances to make cuts, can have the silver lining of making us more efficient, showing us our priorities, and giving us the motivation to work harder to bring back the things that we've lost in this current budget cycle. And so, I would stand to my fellow budget committee members and say, what can we do as a community to help the district be more efficient, to help schools and teachers and programs. I like Sarah's 2 questions that showed us 2 answers instantly, where programs have not only benefited our community, but become more efficient. There are lessons in that hopefully can be translated across the district, and I would, that's what I would encourage out of this process, is the hard work ahead to do even more of that. Thank you to the community for stepping forward. I shared so many of your concerns, and feel like some of that hard work is just getting started so that we honor the great work that our teachers and staff do every day.
I have just a few things to say, and some of it is echoing my fellow board members and budget committee members. Like Tom, I, upon reflection, noticed that this was honestly a rather disturbing budget process this year. When we began in the fall, we were faced with very hard questions and community reflection about what it would be that would be best to cut, knowing full well that there was nothing on that list that was good to cut. That was followed by a discovery of errors that were amplifying the amount of cuts that we were facing. And then thrown into the mix the constant uncertainty of Oregon state budgeting and what the funds would be to support Beaverton students. Like Leanne, and Eric, I'd like to recognize the board's commitment to financial responsibility. We have always and continue to have a goal that is to avoid cutting positions. We are committed to sustainable budgeting given the information that we have, and are always looking forward to what it is that we can do. The multi-year budget planning that has happened is largely a result of board leadership in this area, as well as savings programs that we have requested that staff adhere to. In the end, I believe strongly that a budget reflects values of a community that are shared by a board, community members, teachers, and children. And I was reminded in a letter that came to me today from a student, actually, that as a member of the school board, your job is to put students first. I feel privileged to work as part of a team seated around this table where that is evident by questions that are thoughtful and as well as the actions. You'll note in the budget document that there are detailed explanations of cuts
as well as more transparent than ever information about what the staffing allocation model that guides how we place staff and that reflect the commitment to equity that this group has. I would like to acknowledge the work of staff in putting together this information, as well as community members for their advocacy. I believe that this budget reflects the principles of our strategic plan as well as policy. I do support the difficult decision made to spend rainy day fund this year, expecting that we will be faced yet again next year with the difficult decision about how we will begin to replenish that fund, as well as how to make decisions. It is my strong hope about how we will be adding and not subtracting. As we look forward, I know that there's additional advocacy work that we will all need to do, as well as planning to implement the Student Success Act, which means that I know we'll begin budgeting as soon as we come back to school next year. So I look forward to working collectively with all of you on that process.
Problem going last is all the good things have been said, and I really appreciate all the good work. Very much appreciate the budget committee members. I appreciate your expertise. What you bring to the table as community members is invaluable, and I thank you for giving of your time to be a part of this budget committee. I'm grateful to be a part of a community that values education, and I'm reminded of that every single day. I'm reminded when we pass a levy that funds teachers. I'm reminded when we pass a bond that improves schools for all of our students. I'm reminded when I see community partners that are helping with feeding and clothing and providing invaluable partnerships that we could not provide in this budget. I am reminded when the BEF comes and funds things that enrich our students. We are blessed to live in a community that values education. We are blessed to be a part of a community that we have many stakeholders, and sometimes not everyone's needs can be met because there are so many different stakeholders that we have. I appreciated that there was so much open communication throughout this year. I met with more students, parents, staff members that I would never have the opportunity if they were not there advocating on something that they feel so passionate. It is great to be a part of a community where people care enough to write you a letter, to call you, to stop you in the grocery store, to stop you in every school to let you know how much they value being a part of the Beaverton School District. We are deficit spending. We are dipping into a rainy day fund just to keep treading water. We are counting on the state to fund education differently, and that will still be to keep us from treading water. This will not be a windfall. We are going to have to work our tails off so that we can just keep our heads above water. There is something wrong with that model, that the best we can do is to keep treading water and making the difficult decisions of what is the return on investment, using all the tools in our toolbox of getting to where we need to get, of what is best for kids and making those tough decisions. And lastly, I am reminded of a quote that I give my two own children quite a bit. Whether it is leaving for college or just trying to figure out how they're going to pay for a trip they want to take. You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. Our reality we met face on, and we met the consequences face on. And I look forward to working with my fellow board members and budget members in this community to keep doing what is best for kids. And with that, I support the budget that has been submitted to us.
Thank you to the school board and the budget committee for your comments and questions. I actually still have, I think, maybe just one question. We talked early on in this meeting about the PERS reduction well, that's not the way that I should say that. But you mentioned, the superintendent, that if possible that in 2 years' budget, we would see a reduction in the increase in PERS costs. And my question is what that means for people who actually receive PERS benefits, because if it's just a cost savings to us, but it's taking away benefits from those who are working here, then that's not really a real savings. So we just didn't really talk about what it looks like.
And I'll start on it, and then I know we have actually a PERS expert sits on our budget committee as well as our CFO. So the main savings from the PERS to employers would be they're kind of kicking the ball down the road, and it's kind of like your house. We're going from a 15-year mortgage, putting it on a 30-year mortgage. That's one aspect of it. And that's probably would bring the biggest savings to the district. The other aspect that they're doing that has individual concerns is for Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees, they are reducing the amount that goes into your IAP account by 2.5%. And if you are an Observe employee, then it's 0.75 unless you make $30,000 or less. And so I think that you will probably see some challenges from the courts because that is money that people are counting on to go in and support their retirements that will not be going in to support their retirement. There are some other factors in there, basically talking about if you make X amount of dollars, then any PERS benefits over a certain amount, I believe that's $195,000, would not go into the account. I think it's important to note there, though, that $195,000, I believe, includes, it's just not your total, just your salary. There's some other benefits that are added into that to carry that up and above. And so that's another aspect. The other aspect of the PERS legislation could be a benefit to some people depending on where you're at in your career. And that's, they're looking at a work back called a work back, in which PERS employees, if the district decided to reemploy you back or another district wanted to reemploy you back, you could do that for up to 5 years and continue to receive your PERS benefits as well as work. Currently, with the exception of, I believe it's counties under 35,000 in population, you can only work 1,039 hours. I keep looking at you, so you can, I know your legs aren't long enough, but you can kick me. So that could be, because what we're really scared of is for some people to decide that they're going to get out and we're going to have a significant teacher shortage and or public service shortage in different areas. But is this only for educators? Statewide, so it would be any employee. So what did I miss? Oh, no.
It potentially would be dedicated side accounts that could lower rates in the future.
So there'll be a potential to have an offset if you were to put more money into a side account, which offsets your rates. And I think the second half of your question is what is the effect of the district? And a lot of the re-amortization that you brought up, which is kicking the can down the road, if you want to use the terminology, will either help rates stay stable or it will lower them. Obviously, we're up against 4 and 5% increases over the next several biennia. Statewide or every year for you. It's the re-amortization will lower that rate down. It doesn't affect what happens to the employees. The employee side is the redirection, and that's really what will most likely be challenged in courts. The redirecting each dollar.
So in 2021, if there would have been no PERS legislation, we would have probably been looking at, Beaverton would have been looking at another $17 million, $18 million increase, or it could have been higher than that compared, depending on what payroll was. I believe it was about a 5 to a 6% increase for all school districts depending on whether their first liability. So, more to come. Once again, I'm pretty confident that it will be challenged in the courts, especially as in regards to the employees at IAP being redirected.
So going last means that really everything has probably already been said. I did see a couple faces when we mentioned the 140 positions that were being cut this year. But through our last meeting that we had, somebody threw out a number on how many retirees you've already got for this coming year, and I think it was more than that, wasn't it? No? It was close though.
And it's not a one.
Well, yeah.
So currently, I think we're probably somewhere around 115 people that would be leaving the district, either for retirement or resignation and/or they found a job or something, are moving on. But as Mrs. Robertson indicated, it really depends on the licensure of the positions to be filled. So if we have an overabundance of, I'll just put out there, elementary teachers or social studies teachers or physical education teachers, those people could be impacted. Having said that, though, I just want to acknowledge right now our Human Resources Department is working overtime as much as they can, because I know that, and my heart goes out especially to our temporary probationary 1, probationary 2, those probationary 3 folks that are waiting to hear if they have a job, if they don't have a job. They've got car payments to make, they've got student loans to pay, they're trying to decide, should I go out and try to get another job? It's stressful. It's been extremely stressful for those folks. I believe we're getting close. I don't want to come out and say it's going to happen on this day, because we want to make sure when we have to make a decision that we're making the right decision, abiding by the contract. I know we've been working closely with DEA and others, and we just want to make sure it's done right, but we're working as fast as we can, and we want to let those people know just as quick as we can where we're at. I get more optimistic every day as more and more people, whether they decide that they're going to retire or go in another direction. So, but I don't want to come out and make a statement that, number one, ends up not being true. But I am becoming more optimistic every day that we're going to have less of an impact on a greater number of people, if that makes sense.
I think that's all my questions. I don't want to repeat what everyone's already said, especially Tom had a lot of great things to say today. I did want to say how much I appreciate that Jim came on out of retirement and that he has agreed to stay for a little while. I was happy to hear that there will be an audit of our systems over the summer. I think that that was one of my big concerns as someone who works in the county in my regular job, that there would be errors like this in the budget, and that my hope is that we will find some checks and balances so that they don't happen in the future. So I'm really glad that that process will be happening this summer. I am concerned about the search for a future CFO, and I hope that we will get some good candidates, because right now that process hasn't started yet. And so I wish that Jim could stay forever, but Jim told me how old he was the other day and that he was not willing to do that. I think that this has been the phrase of this budget, is that we are hopeful for the future, and that's one of the things that I'm hopeful for, is that we will continue to have strong leadership, that we will get someone in here who will ensure that these types of situations don't happen in the future. And I'm hopeful that we will get additional funding to make this next budget season a little bit easier. But I really appreciate all the extra work that went in. I know that there were people who were sometimes texting me at 11:30 at night because they were still working. And I know that it was really hard for staff. I know that, as Superintendent Browning just said, that it was a really hard year to not know what was going to happen. And I hope that in the future we don't have a roller coaster of a budget like this, where it starts so completely this direction and it ends in a much better place. It'd be better if it just started closer to where it's going to finish. So again, I just want to thank everyone on the school board, on the budget committee, the community for reaching out. We really appreciate all the comments. that were shared. We read every email, we listened to every comment, and we really took it to heart, and we tried to find the most important place with that extra funding that we took out of the rainy day fund, and it was, the biggest focus was class size, and that's what the community said, that's what teachers said, and that is where we focused our funding this year. And hopefully we will be able to, like Anne said, be adding instead of subtracting in the future. We're gonna turn the time back over to Superintendent Grudden for his closing remarks.
Just once again to apologize. No superintendent wants this to happen on his or her watch. And I think Jim said something very important at the beginning. I guess you can, you're the Madam Chair.
I skipped the main purpose of this budget committee meeting. We have to approve the budget and the tax levies. Do we have a motion to approve the budget? I'll move. And I move that the Beaverton School District budget in the amount of $982,753,571 for all funds for 2019-20 be approved. That the permanent tax rate of $4.6930 per thousand of assessed value be assessed in support of the general fund. That a local option tax rate of $1.25 per $1,000 of assessed value be assessed in support of the general fund, and a tax of $62,517,834 be approved for the service of bonded debt obligations of the school district. If you will raise your hand if you support to approve this budget. And the motion passes. We'll go back to Superintendent.
I remember that. Once again, I don't think anybody wants this to happen on their watch. And I think Mr. Schersinger said something that was very important. You want to make sure that people feel comfortable in coming forward if they see something. That's something is whether it's in the classroom, in the central office, but also I think it behooves us not to wait for somebody to come forward, to go out there and even almost prod people, hey, what's going on? What are you seeing out there where you're at? And having people feel the trust that they can come forward without any retributions. So that is going to be one of my key initiatives, is to make sure that people feel that there's transparency and also feeling comfortable to come forward. I too want to thank especially our business staff. I know that they have put in some tremendous hours. I know that we've probably violated some labor work laws in the last, but they've been so committed to helping, making sure that's happened. Their work ethic has been unbelievable. I also want to thank Sarah sitting back there, thank BEA for working with us, as well as OSEA, and helping us go through this. Appreciate, I see some faces out there that have been here on multiple budget meetings, taking the time to come to all the budget meetings, and especially thank the budget committee, and apologies to those of you who this might be your first rodeo, that you're still on, and most people would have been knocked off a long time ago. So really appreciate all of yours. I thank the chair and the vice chair for your leadership also.
Thank you. That concludes our meeting today. The next meeting will be a budget hearing at the school board meeting where they will vote on this budget, and it'll be on Monday, June 24th at 6:15 at the Beaverton School District Administration Center. Thank you.